Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home.
Greetings, Karen.
Good morning, Dan.
So we got a special guest today.
We do. I'm excited about this.
Tim McDermott. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your podcast.
We are very happy to have you. Tim McDermott is the extension agent in Franklin County, Ohio, which you may or may not know as the city of Columbus.
Yes, busy place, but a lot of agriculture in there. So Tim keeps busy.
Yeah, and he also comes to us with a background in veterinary science, and he was actually a vet for quite a while for companion animals, and he talks a lot about large and food animals, and he also talks about animal and plant agriculture for our urban agricultural audiences. But today, we have asked him here to talk to us about everybody's most favorite bugs, and that's ticks. And we should really take a moment to point out that ticks are not insects. They are actually arachnids.
I know, he's going to scare us. That's what he's going to do, right, Tim?
My goal is really only to mildly to moderately terrify people. We're going to do a scale of 1 to 10. We're going to try to keep it about a 6 or below. So if we start getting into 7, 8, 9 territory, I want you guys to provide some constructive feedback for me to tell maybe a little happier story.
All right, we're good on that.
Yeah, we friendly ticks, right? That's what we need.
That is exactly what we need.
Happy little ticks. All right, so tell us, ticks have been in the news a pretty good amount lately. We hear that there's a new tick that we're dealing with, and there's ticks that make people not eat meat anymore, and all sorts of crazy stuff. So we're going to kind of hand the mic over to you, figuratively, and let you kind of go on.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do is focus mostly on the state of ticks in Ohio, but I will tell you that it pretty much is mirrored by what's going on in West Virginia as well. We have gone from 1 tick of medical importance in Ohio 20 years ago to 5 nowadays, adding 2 new ones in the last couple of years. So what I do is I go around the state doing tick and tick vector disease outreach as sort of a public health engagement, because we really have a lot of myths that are out there that persist because we still think about ticks the way they used to be, and we don't think about ticks the way they are right now. So myth number 1 would be that ticks are only active in summer. And while we do have heightened patterns of tick activity here in Ohio from April through September, quite honestly, you can encounter a tick any month out of the year. And in fact, we have positive cases of Lyme disease diagnosed in Ohio every single month out of the year, including January. And then myth number 2 is that ticks prefer the woods. And while we have a couple of ticks that really do enjoy spending their time in the woods, like the black-legged tick, also known as the deer tick, or say the Lone Star tick, we have ticks that are perfectly content to hang out in an open, grassy area like a meadow or a pasture, or quite honestly, even in the lawn in your backyard. And then myth number 3 is that it takes a full day of attachment of a tick on its host in order to vector a disease to the host. And that's assuming that disease is present in the first case. What we are finding is that was accurate when we talk about Lyme disease that was vectored to humans from deer ticks. But the new research, and research is coming out every day because we really are now starting to take a much deeper look at ticks and tick vector disease. But what we're finding is that the variables are what is the species of tick, because different ticks transmit or vector different diseases. Not every tick carries every disease. They all kind of have their favorites. And then what is the actual disease? Because different diseases live inside ticks in different places. They might live in the salivary glands and be vectored really quickly. They might live in their guts and take a little bit of time when they're feeding before they would be vectored to their host. And then, believe it or not, we even have to worry about what life cycle stage the tick is in, because it might be a larval stage, it might be a nymphal stage, it might be adult, and they can transmit at different times depending on what life cycle stage that they are.
So when you're talking about those life cycle stages, one of the things that I have always believed, and you can tell me if it's a myth or not, is that the nymphal stage is the one that is most common for vectoring Lyme disease, simply because they're so small and they'll stay attached longer because you don't notice them as much. Is there truth to that?
Honestly, there is some truth to that. If you evaluate ticks by size, they're not very big. And one of the smallest of the species would be the deer tick. And when you look at their nymphal stage, it is literally as big as the period at the end of a sentence, about the size of a poppy seed. And so it is more likely to attach and feed on a host because you won't feel it, and you will likely not detect it on a tick check when you come in from outside. And so they can evade detection, which is quite the problem if you are using a tick check as part of your personal sort of protective safety plan, because they're so tiny, their nickname is a walking freckle. You might not see them whatsoever.
That's a good nickname.
And, talk about deer ticks. Deer tick is the one tick I think people are mostly concerned about. It's the tick that I get the most calls on, deer tick / black-legged tick. It is the one that's mostly associated with Lyme disease. And I know that, when we talk about ticks populations going up, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, but you're talking about not only the ticks that are already here, the deer tick being the one that likes to be in the woods a little bit, well, more so than maybe some of the other ticks that we might talk about today. But not only are the populations that have been around up, but there's also new ticks that are being introduced, and they're doing just fine as well. So what we're finding is, even though people kind of have this concept of one specific tick species that they worry about, the tick population in general have all gone up. So we have to get a little bit more educated on the different ticks, and it's not only a Lyme disease thing anymore.
Well, I am right there with you in terms of public enemy number one in the tick world being the deer tick. The deer tick is primarily responsible as a vector for Lyme disease, but there's a bunch of other diseases that they can vector to humans, companion animals, and livestock, including anaplasmosis, including ehrlichiosis, Powassan virus encephalitis is vectored by deer ticks, and that is a no-joke disease that you do not want to encounter. There's a bunch of articles that have just dropped into my Google feed in the last month or so that a disease that is vectored by deer ticks called babesia has become endemic now in New England, where that tick really made its first appearance on a large scale. So when we talk about Lyme disease, that is named after Lyme, Connecticut, which is a city. But we are seeing host range expansion of ticks into lots of different places because of global climate change, because of reforestation, because of movement of animals, because we have movement of animals into urban environments. So, when you think about a tick and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to, only really encounter that in a rural environment. The last 2 times I had an American dog tick on me, I was sitting in a lawn in Columbus, Ohio. One time was a graduation party, and the other was just watching my kids swim, and I felt one crawling up on me. When we look at the time frame of tick expansion into Ohio, part of the problem that we have is it just happens so fast. 20 years ago, we had the American dog tick, and that was the one that I combated in private practice for a long, long time. And then when we get to, say, 2010, we had the first identified deer tick. It was in Coshocton County, over your way a little bit, on a farm there. And then we had, say, around 2014, maybe 2015, we had identifications of the Lone Star tick in southern Ohio. And then you just go back to the last couple of years, boom, we get Gulf Coast tick over around Cincinnati. And then we had our initial detection of the Asian longhorn tick in Gallia County on a rescue dog. And then since that point, we have gone from one county in Ohio, just in the last, say, 18, 24 months, that we now have 7 counties with positive detections of Asian longhorn ticks.
Yeah, the Asian longhorn tick, that's getting a lot of attention here in Belmont County because it's close by. It's in the county as well. To be honest with you, just kind of, it's all around us. And these ticks, they're posing a different kind of problem. We're seeing like impact of the livestock. And Lyme disease isn't a concern for the Lone Star tick. And what I find concerning about that is, like you were saying, we grew up with ticks being more of a nuisance, but now all these different tick species are popping up. They like different habitats and or at least prefer different hosts, not to say that they can't harm humans. And it just seems to be a very overwhelming problem that I think a lot of people do kind of get scared. And I know, Tim, you were one of the ones that really helped Ohio State Extension put some resources for tick information out there. Could you talk about the website that you helped put together to help educate people on not only the trends of ticks that are out there, but what types there are and what to look for and what to really worry about and how to prepare yourself in case you do encounter a tick, or how to prepare yourself so that you don't encounter a tick?
Well, that would be the preference. When I do a presentation, the first thing that I say to them, and I say this straight-faced, and I try to make sure that they understand that I know what I'm saying, but what I say to the attendees is, my goal for you and what I recommend you strive for is to never, ever get bitten by a tick for any reason for the rest of your life. And the reason is, we are seeing increased cases and we are seeing increased prevalence rates. It used to be that it was not common for a tick to actually carry disease inside it, and it can't vector it to you if it doesn't have it. But we're seeing prevalence rates in certain places really, really high. There was a study within the last couple of years, and they did a tick drag in a public park in western Pennsylvania, and PA is full of ticks, same as West Virginia and Ohio. So they captured a bunch of deer ticks and they tested them for Powassan virus encephalitis. And the prevalence of ticks that were positive for that disease was over 75%. And that's just astronomical.
Wow.
Yeah, you had mentioned the Lone Star tick, and that tick particularly terrifies me because it can vector diseases, and it has a number of diseases that it'll vector to humans, companion animals, and livestock. But one of the things that it's been associated with is actually an allergy. And if you are bitten by a Lone Star tick and your immune system reacts negatively to some of the carbohydrate components in that tick saliva, you can become allergic to those components. And those components are found in non-primate mammalian muscle, things like pork or beef or lamb or venison. And you can then become allergic to pork or beef or lamb and venison, meaning you just got allergic to a bacon cheeseburger from a tick bite. And since bacon cheeseburgers are my absolute favorite food, that personally terrifies the heck out of me.
Indeed, yeah. And so with that, I was under the understanding it was a virus that the tick carried, but you're saying it's not. It's a reaction of your immune system to the tick bite, to the saliva?
Yes, so ticks can carry and vector bacterial, viral, and protozoal organisms, as well as they're implicated in causing allergic syndromes in people whose immune systems react negatively to components of their saliva.
Wow. Yeah, they're great little bugs.
I know. Where are we at on the scale? Are we a 5? Maybe we're a 6?
I think we're kind of getting up there.
All right.
So I'll tell a fun little story. I went down to Watauga State Park and I went backwoods hiking. And so, I'm down there and I spent the entire day hiking. And before I left, I sat down because the sun was setting. And so I just sat in the grass and stared at this beautiful sunset. And so I got back to the cabin and I counted 5 dog ticks. So I got rid of all the dog ticks and that was fine. One of them was attached, but not very deeply. So he was easy to get rid of. But after showering and after I had done my tick check, I was just scratching myself and there was a deer tick tucked right into a skin fold right there. And it was completely invisible to me. I did not know it was there until I scratched myself. I'm like, wait, I don't remember having a skin tag there. So I had to get that one off. He was dug in pretty deep. So I was not happy about that. So you got to take those precautions. But sitting in that grassy field, it's like, I should have known better.
Yeah, Karen's not helping the situation here. And now I think we're up at a 7 or 8.
Well, I think the only take-home point we can get from that is nobody should ever set foot outside of their houses again for the rest of their lives.
I don't think I can survive like that. I really don't.
Just kidding. No, just kidding. Just kidding. No. All right, we're probably 8.5.
So if I'm getting anxious and I want some information, tell us about the Ohio State Bite site.
So I am going to give you guys a sneak preview of something that we are working on that will be an improvement from that site. And it's not quite there yet. But what we are doing is me and other members of the Tick Vector Disease Working Group at Ohio State to create a landing site that will be much more robust and will pull in data from the CDC and the Ohio Department of Health and the Ohio Department of Agriculture so that we can give folks the tools in the toolbox that they would use to keep themselves, their families, and their animals tick safe. Things like making sure you familiarize yourself with the correct way to remove a tick if you have one embedded on you, because there is a right way and a wrong way. When I was in private practice, boy, I saw a million different wrong ways. I had dogs come in with motor oil on them, and people would put a cigarette out on a tick or do all kind of crazy things. And inappropriately removing a tick actually is a way to increase the chances that you would encounter a tick vector disease. And so the way you take it off, the correct way is pointy tweezers or one of the tick removal tools that kind of looks like the claw on a claw hammer. And you have to get all the way down to the head that is partially embedded in the host. And with firm upward pressure, you want to pull up until you make sure you get the entire tick out, head and abdomen. It'll probably come with a little plug of what looks like whitish stuff. That's actually the cement that they use to glue themselves into the host. And then you wash your hands and you wash that spot and you put that tick into a bag and you save it because we want to identify it. What we're doing is recommending that ticks would be then submitted to your county public health organization. Some are on board with that, some are not. But generally the process would be it would go to the county so they know what they have. And then that would be sent to ODH, and then we would know what we have statewide. And then eventually it's going to make its way over to Ohio State for identification and pathogen testing. So when we get the new website, I will get that to you and everybody in Extension so that it's a one-click landing spot that will have all the newest tick information and tick research. And then the next thing we talk about is how do you keep yourself safe in terms of that sort of personal protective plan, which is really, an integrated pest management protocol. You want to do things like wear long pants, long sleeves, light colored clothing, and that's so that you can see a tick walking on you. I recommend permethrin treated clothing, shoes, pants. I like putting permethrin on clothing. It has to be a permethrin product labeled for use in fabric. As anybody in Extension knows, make sure to read, understand, and follow the label on any pesticide. The label is the law. Don't feel like treating it yourself? Pretty much any outfitter is going to have treated clothing on their website or in person. Permethrin treated clothing has been around for a long time. Dan, whenever you were wearing a uniform in the military has been treating uniforms with permethrin for decades. And then you want to couple permethrin-treated clothing with a repellent. And we have lots of choices out there. And what I recommend you become is a label reader, because there are so many choices. There really isn't one perfect choice where I can say everybody does this, because you might find that certain ones are more appropriate for kids, certain ones may last longer, certain ones may or may not even be labeled for ticks. So make sure if you're going to put a repellent on, use one that's labeled for ticks. And then you want to make sure that you are doing a good tick check when you get out of tick environment, which as we know now is any environment on any given day of the year. You can hop in the shower, you can take your clothes and you can toss them in the dryer for 20 minutes. That will kill ticks through the heat and through desiccation. And then make sure that you take your four-legged friends into consideration as part of your biosecurity protocol, because our puppies and our kitties do not do really good tick checks, and they are tick magnets. They are right in that environment. you'll never see a nymphal deer tick on a black Labrador. So work with your veterinarian to make sure that you have the best product that fits in your budget, labeled for efficacy for the various ticks, and then note how long it's good for, because some have labels that are longer or shorter depending on the tick species of worry.
And when your veterinarian says that you need to give them that medication all year round, that's because ticks are active all year round. Like the medication I give to my dog, it's a chewable tablet, and the flea resistance lasts 2 months, but the tick resistance lasts 1 month. And so you need to be aware that there are some variances inside the medication itself for different pests. So do give it to them in the wintertime. I know you're like, oh, but it's cold, the ticks aren't active, but that's not true. Especially as we get more varieties of ticks and we get different weather patterns. And so it's really important that you maintain all of those medications all through the winter time, even when you don't think the ticks are active. Because, I mean, I saw a mosquito in December this year. Those seasons really aren't as reliable. And the new varieties of insects that we're getting as a result of our global economy and traveling and moving of livestock and pets from one state to another, it's really important to recognize things are spreading fast and things are changing quickly. And so you need to take whatever precautions you can to protect yourself and your animals.
When you're talking about the precautions, right, you're talking about treating your clothes with permethrin, making sure you're applying the right DEET formulation that's going to repel ticks. We're not saying don't go outside unless you're wearing permethrin clothes, like every day is an Army drill. No, but like when I think people just need to, get in mind that when you are going out, just remember that, these ticks are a bigger presence than they've ever been. So make sure you read the label. Like Tim was saying, it's the law. And it's also one of the most informative pieces of literature out there for pesticides and anything you're doing. So not so much don't do anything, but have a little more planning as you do things.
Yes, your greatest tool in your toolbox to keep yourself safe is going to be awareness. Public health awareness of the problem is going to go a long way towards keeping yourself tick safe. So I still go hiking. I go to the metro parks here. What I do is I make sure I stay closer to the middle of the pathway because I'm much less likely to brush into the vegetation where a tick would be attached and it would be questing, looking to find its next host for its next blood meal. And then when we talk about keeping ourselves safe, when we talk about keeping our companion animals safe, one of the things that we really need to do as parents, because I'm a parent, I have 2 kids, is make sure that we are taking responsibilities of keeping our kiddos tick safe. When you look at the Ohio Department of Health's website, you can see that the 2 most diagnosed by age and sex in Ohio are kiddos from 5 to 9 and 10 to 14. They are out in the woods. They're rolling around out there. They're not doing great tick checks. They're likely not wearing permethrin-treated clothing or applying any kind of repellent on there unless we are counseling them to take those precautions and we're educating our kiddos.
Yeah, that's so true. I have a 13-year-old boy who, when he can, would live in the woods. And so I definitely think I need to renew that tick protocol with him and get him back up to speed on his awareness. And that's a good reminder.
Yeah, 13-year-old boy is nearly twice as likely to contract Lyme disease as a 13-year-old girl.
Oh, thanks.
Sorry.
And Tim, I know that you guys are working on a new website and everything, but the Ohio State University Bite site, and it's BITE, it's really good. Some of the ticks that we were talking about, you can find pictures of them, location information, and take preventative measures. Maybe if you do come into contact with one, you have prevented contact with 4 other ones. And that can go a long way in keeping you safe.
This is true. But before we run out of time today, Tim, I'd really like for you to touch on some topics for our agricultural producers especially with Asian longhorn tick and the presence of thalaria. I would really like to give our livestock producers and our farmers who are always outside and going through tall grasses and putting themselves out in those risky environments, what can our farmers do for themselves and their livestock, knowing that they can't just avoid those situations?
What I recommend with anybody who is large or small ruminant cattle producers is to recognize that we have a new tick that can potentially impact your livestock operations. We have had 3 large-scale detections of ticks on cattle in Ohio. They have actually followed a pattern. What we have seen with them is when we are looking for, say, what is the optimal habitat for the Asian longhorn tick? They like a little bit more heat, but they also like some humidity. So when it's hot out, but they have a nice humid place in order to live and breed, they can really explode into tremendous numbers. And so in Morgan County, Belmont County, and Monroe County, we have had 3 instances of large numbers of ticks on cattle. We've actually had fatalities secondary to those large numbers in Monroe County. And where we've seen those occur is when animals have been rotated into tall grass. In Monroe, they went into hypermature grass. It was eye high. And in the other 2 counties, the producers had moved them into that sort of last paddock in their paddock rotation. And that has all occurred in July in Ohio. So when we are seeing huge numbers of ticks on cattle, we're seeing those in the heat of the summer in tall grass. That gives the ticks the heat that they enjoy, and that gives them the humidity for them to spend the majority of their time, because they're only on the animal for a short period of time to get a blood meal. They need the rest of that time to mature or lay eggs or do their other business down there. One nice thing we can say is, so far, all of the products that we have labeled for tick control on cattle have shown efficacy. And there are some products that have shown efficacy in other places that would need an extra label use from your veterinarian. So I highly recommend that any cattle producer make sure that they have a great veterinary client-patient relationship in place with their veterinarian. So if they do have a question and they need to contact their vet on short notice, they are able to do that and get guidance from their veterinarian. And then I want the producers to realize that if they are in the environment where Asian longhorn tick are present, they are potentially hosts as well. So when you're working your animals or you're moving through a pasture, or even if you're on machinery and you're bush hogging, mowing, making hay, or whatever you're doing, realize that you can encounter those ticks and you can spread them to different parts of the farm, or you can bring them home on you. And so awareness is going to be a great thing. Making sure to do more frequent checks of your animals, I would say, especially in the at-risk time period, and having a great relationship with your veterinarian in case you have a concern. And you had mentioned about Thalaria. That is a protozoal parasite that affects cattle that can be vectored by ticks. If you have questions about where you can find tick materials or outreach or getting a presentation scheduled for your cattlemen's organization, make sure you reach out to your extension educator in your county and they will get something going. And I would be happy to assist in creating outreach materials for them.
Oh, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. We enjoyed having you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.